Thank you very much, Ralph and Mark, for your kind words. And thank everyone for coming to this installation. It's more than heartwarming to see many people that I really have great respect and admiration for. I also myself want to thank Stifel and Quinette Gens. One of the things, as Mark mentioned, I'm involved with is coal research. So it's sort of funny that somebody dealing with coal is going to get a endowed chair in environmental engineering science. But you'll see why there's a reason for that, hopefully later on. But Stifel was really clearly a visionary, certainly a visionary in terms of water and sanitary needs. And I'll actually be talking a little bit about that and how that relates to the progress we've made worldwide in terms of health. As Mark had mentioned, and I think Ralph mentioned, I'm in big trouble. I was going to thank Stifel and Quinette and mention that I'm going to try to live up to their expectations. Now I have to live up to Mark's and Ralph's expectations for this as well, so I'll do my best. Also, I wanted to thank Mark, particularly. I'm continuously amazed at everything that Mark does for this university and the progress he's made and the vision he has, and it's a pleasure to be able to be part of an institution that he is at the helm of. Also, Ralph Quattrano, I was not one of those that was so certain that a biologist was going to be appropriate for engineering school. But there's no question that, leadership is an amazing thing. You just have to understand how to lead, and he's done a magnificent job of leading this engineering school. And he's got my full backing, provided he gives me my next raise. And Pratim Biswas, who is the chair of the department, who I've been involved with for a long time, who actually involved in the development of this department, has been another one of those just superb leaders that's brought this department to a very high level in a very short time. I appreciate not just that I'm under his department, but also that I'm fortunate enough to be able to work with Pratim on scientific ventures when the few moments we have time together working on science, we actually try to do some science. Also, I came in mechanical engineering. And Sal Satura was chair at that time and hired me. Dave Peters then was the chair, and now Phil Bailey is the chair. And each of those, the three of them share, in addition to just very much enormous leadership capabilities, also enormous integrity, and there was something always about that department that was it was an enjoyable place to work, and I think it still is. I felt very much, have to know that I was very difficult to move, and I very much appreciate everything the department has done for me. We have very much skilled and dynamic leadership at WashU University, and it's given me opportunity to succeed, and I appreciate everything the university has afforded me in that direction. I also want to acknowledge publicly my students, particularly graduate students, those of you that are here. Some of you are not. Some of them just graduated yesterday, literally, and moved on. I think my personal feeling is that the relationship between the mentor and the graduate student is really the key thing that a research university like WashU University has that is particularly valuable. And it's been a pleasure for me to be able to mentor students, and particularly such talented students, and they've contributed so profoundly to my career. I want to thank them as well. This whole event, there's a lot to it that is not clear. It's all under the surface. But I want to thank Abe Cross and Megan Waite, Brooke Haley and Bridget Wigman for their contributions, and also want to thank my assistant, Lynn Salzman, for everything she's done as well to make this happen. So I want to give them a round of applause if I can. Before we start, I have to step back a little bit. People that know me know I always focus on perspective type of thing. And so putting the installation ceremony in perspective, this last week and a half I had some events occur that somewhat put this, as nice as an installation is, it puts it in perspective. I was in Jerusalem just a week ago and saw two events. I had two close friends that were there. One of them was there for the bris of his grandson. The next day, I was with a friend who buried his 28-year-old daughter. So it was a very powerful message going into an installation because we sort of recognize, we have all these accomplishments, but that this gives us a chance to reflect that regardless of the accomplishments, we have to continue the next day and live each day to the fullest. So hopefully with this installation, I won't sit on my laurels and will continue to try to make the chancellor, the dean, Pratim, who else, happy. I'm sorry, I have some work to do. I'll see you later. Okay, so I mentioned the title of this talk is Observations of Multifunctionality in Nature. And I understand it sounds complex. You're going to expect to see equations. It has nothing to do with that at all. Once I explain it to you, it will be very clear why I had to choose that title. But first, I want to mention, I have a good friend, Gregory Oblonsky, and he was coaching me along. Always gives, unrequested advice, but this was a valuable moment where he said, Rich, you have to do something personal. You can't just talk about other things. So I said, okay, I'll try to do that. So I sat back and thought, what was the origin of this talk? And I realized what the origin was after I sat down and thought, and I realized I actually had written down the experience. And I don't write hardly ever just experiences, but this was so powerful that I did. And so I thought that I would actually read what I wrote to you. And it reminds me, not too long ago, I had to give a talk right after Gerald Early, who's one of the best writers in the university, and I had to talk after Gerald. And Mark made a comment, I'll paraphrase Mark, he says, scientists and engineers are not all good writers. So, and that's probably true for much in this case, but I'm going to do my best, and so bear with me. It's a little bit long, but puts things in perspective a little bit. You'll appreciate why some of these ideas came out. Oh, you know what? I don't have this on. I guess I'm going to turn that on. It was about 13 years ago on a cold autumn night, similar to today. The date on the Jewish calendar was Rosh Chodesh Elul, a day when Jews all over the world begin saying special prayers, the Slichos prayers, in preparation for Rosh Hashanah, the new year. The prayers are said every day for 30 days. Through these prayers, one is preparing himself for the upcoming Day of Judgment, Yom Kippur. Introspection is essential. It's a serious night, and the first time we say the Slichos prayers, we begin at midnight, not waiting until morning, so as to demonstrate our eagerness to begin the process. This night, I wanted to take my two sons camping on our land in the country right after the Slichos prayers. We love to camp, and sitting around a campfire is my way to arousing introspection. This is true for many people, but in my case, it's especially true. As many of you know, fire is my vocation as well as my avocation. I've been studying fire for the last 15 years, and I thought I knew a lot about it. But this particular night, I was to discover something about fire that required someone who had a resume just like mine, someone who knew the physics and chemistry of fire, but who wanted to understand it at a deeper level, might I say a transcendental level. The boys were sound asleep in the back of the van when I pulled up to the campsite, a primitive site with nothing more than a clearing on the top of a ridge, but with a beautiful view. I jumped out of the van, ready to set up camp, only to realize that my kids, ages 10 and 12, were not going to be much help. Worse than that, they had already made themselves at home, lying comfortably in the back of the van in the 2 sleeping bags that we had brought. When I packed the van, I had reasoned that since it was a cool autumn night, 2 bags would be enough. And they would have been, had the kids not decided to fall asleep on them inside the van. Children that age are beautiful when they sleep, and I didn't have the heart to wake them. So I set out to plan my night's rest. The first thing that any camper does is build a fire, especially if he needs it for warmth. So I gathered up some leaves and twigs, lit a match, and I let nature take care of the rest. As the flame grew, I added larger twigs, then sticks, and eventually large logs, perhaps 3 inches in diameter. I had done this many times before, so the process seemed routine, at least at this point in the night. The fire was soon ablaze, and feeling proud of my refined fire-starting abilities, I settled in to enjoy the fire. It was a perfect night for a campfire, one where you need the fire to keep you warm, where your back is cool and your front is toasty, where your face can feel the radiant glow of the fire, but a cool breeze brushes against it. The feeling is somewhat reminiscent of the sensation you get when tasting hot fudge on cold ice cream. It was time to retire, and seeing that my children were not budging, I searched for something to cover myself with. All I had was a pup tent, made of a wispy, thin polyester material that was meant to breathe, not to serve as a blanket. Resolved that this would have to do, I stoked up the fire to fend off the cold and prepared my resting spot as close to the fire as I could safely be. The sky was brilliant, my body was warm, and in no time I was fast asleep, at least for a bit. 2 hours later, I awoke shivering. I looked over at the fire, my once bold companion, and I found that it had transformed into meek, ash-covered coals that appeared lifeless at the time. I begrudgingly got up and prepared myself what I expected would be another fire-starting exercise. To my surprise, moments after throwing a log on the coals, the fire was burning on its own, and the radiant warmth that had lulled me to sleep was back. What a sensation! But I was too exhausted to appreciate anything more that I once again had heat and could now go back to sleep. And so I did, at least for another 2 hours. And then I awoke, shivering once again. The night had grown cold and the fire had once again faded. As I began thinking of what I had to do to get warm again, I got the sense that I was beginning a routine reminiscent of those nights when my children were infants and I was responsible for waking up in the middle of the night to feed them a bottle of their mother's pumped milk. Only now, I was feeding the fire, and in return, my reward was not a few hours reprieve from a baby's cry, but rather life-preserving warmth. And Maury reminds me that she never remembers me getting up in the middle of the night to feed her. I remember. Being now familiar with my routine, I did not get up to stoke the fire, but rather grabbed the nearest log, and without leaving the comfort of my polyester sheet, threw the log onto the fire. In less than a minute, the fire was back in all its glory. My body was warming, and I prepared to fall back to sleep. And that's when it hit me. All the years of late nights, working to understand how fire makes light, how the complex reactions produce heat, how the flame radiates its heat away, the complex dynamics associated with flame stabilization that are essential to keep the flame anchored to its source, how buoyancy causes the flame to rise upward, the dynamics associated with flame ignition, extinction, subparticle formation, and oxidation, electromagnetic radiation from black bodies and gases, quantum mechanics of light, turbulence and laminar flow, Brownian motion, and thermophoresis of subparticles. The sparks of the fire had ignited my thoughts like a bed of straw on a dry summer day. What I had just experienced was nothing short of miraculous. Fire is not some inanimate object like mineral or water. It's not just a chemical reaction, and it definitely is not a biological life form. And yet, man has a relationship with fire, and fire with man. I had nurtured the fire, and in return, it had nurtured me. The relationship was synergistic, almost symbiotic. But I also understood the complexity of the physical and chemical phenomena that were at play in this relationship, the multitude of processes that needed to occur in just the right way. And then it occurred to me that there was a reason I was given the gift of understanding fire, the gift of children that needed their sleep. Fire is a unique entity. It shares the appearance of life, but it is not life. It shares a relationship with man, but it is not alive. And thus, the sparks of this talk were born. Okay, so enough of the personal. So, observations of multifunctionality in nature. First of all, there's two key words, observation and multifunctionality. Observation means that we're not going to draw any conclusions today. What we're really going to do is observe some just fascinating characteristics of nature, and multifunctionality I have to explain by example. Okay, so what do we mean by multifunctionality? Well, let's first talk about water. Water is an amazing substance. This one substance has such multiplicity of unique properties that are integral to the essential function of the world, both inanimate and living things. In other words, it has multiple functions, and so the name multifunctionality. Let's think about it. First, let's consider how important water is to everything except man. Water has unique properties that allow it to evaporate at a temperature that's perfect for the Earth's needs. It supplies us humidity, clouds, dew, and rain that bring life to the world in the form of photosynthesis. It has unique properties that allow it to freeze at just the right temperature and to expand when it freezes to ensure that life can be sustained in the oceans. It has unique properties of surface tension that allow it to be transported up enormous heights to sustain plants and trees. We could go on, but it's clear that water has more than one function. It has many functions, and therefore the multifunctionality of water. Now let's consider the importance of water to man. For example, the boiling point of water. It's ideal to cook foods. Anyone that's been at the top of a mountain and tried to cook an egg recognizes just 5 to 10 degrees difference in temperature, and cooking food, boiling food becomes a challenge. The properties of ice allow us to preserve food, to keep it cool for long periods of time. Water is a universal solvent, allowing us to wash and clean. It's essential to industrial processes the world over. The surface of our earth is 70% water. Our bodies are 70% water. And tears, this unique human expression that flows from our eyes during the best of times and the worst of times, like the birth of a child or the death of a child, are composed of water. So clearly water has multiple functions, and this multifunctionality is critical to Earth and to man. The question is why? Why do all these things have to occur with a single substance? Why could there not be 5 different substances? One that's waters plants, another that's a solvent, another has the right freezing point, another boiling point, another one that flows out of our eyes to express extreme emotion. Certainly many of these functions are interrelated, but let's look at man and what happens when man invents something. When man invents a shovel, it's used to dig. A screwdriver to screw screws, and sometimes we use screwdrivers for other things we know they don't work very well when you use them for a different reason. Sometimes we have tools that do multiple purposes, like a Swiss Army knife, but really a Swiss Army knife is just many tools combined into one package. Each one still serves a specific purpose. Computers allow us to program, so we can take programs, but each program serves a specific purpose. Why is it that man cannot invent, for example, a drug that also serves as food and clothing? If a person is able to invent something that just does 2 things, we're very happy, and usually we end up using it only for one because it doesn't really do both very well. I try to think of a chemical that has multiple functions like water, and there is one, and probably others, but I thought of Teflon. Teflon is a unique material. It's chemically resistant, it's a good sealant, and it's a non-stick coating. It's not quite as significant as water, but at least it has multiple functions. But water and Teflon are molecular building blocks. Let's look at something that's a system, something that's made of different things They're all working together to accomplish something, and still that has multiple functions. Let's move on to trees. Trees are amazing. Our strong connection to trees is recorded biblically. The first significant event after creation in the universe is the tree of knowledge. Our first interaction with anything is a tree. Ralph Waldo Emerson once wrote, "The wonder is that we can see these trees and not wonder more." Think about all the uses of trees. We use them for food. We build our homes with them. And we burn them for fire to cook our meals. They're critical for biodiversity, being home to many creatures like insects, birds, squirrels, monkeys. They offer shade to animals. They protect the soil from wind and water erosion. They trap carbon dioxide. And they supply the world with oxygen so that insects, fish, birds, mammals can breathe. They've been used for medicinal purposes for centuries. In industry, they supply us with resins to make adhesives, varnishes, and perfumes. And they're important raw materials for organic chemistry. There are trees that allow us to make cork for our wine bottles, rubber for our tires. Something that I just realized this Saturday when I was walking to synagogue for Shabbos services was an appreciation for trees that I never had before. Shabbos is a unique day. It forces you to turn off your computer, turn off your cell phone, get out of the car, and walk and think. And this Shabbos was a beautiful fall day to walk. What I realized was when the long days of summer begin to grow shorter, and we can sense the impending cold, short days of winter, and we're starting to get a little bit depressed, our friend the tree breaks out into a spectacular array of colors, as if to comfort us in our transition to winter. Trees are there for us, and they are truly multifunctional. And once again, why? Why doesn't one thing have one purpose and one purpose alone in nature? Enter fire. And back to the story on the ridgetop. You see, fire is very unique, particularly when it comes to man. Let's think for a minute about civilized man. Civilized, in quotes. What are some of the things that allow us to be civilized? In other words, to leave the jungle, create civilizations, to behave differently from the beasts of the field. First of all, we need to have heat, so we don't have to migrate like the birds. Unlike other mammals, human beings do not grow a winter coat, so without heat, we would not be able to stay in one place. The more advanced civilizations on Earth developed in regions that had excellent climates for agriculture, but they also required heat from a fire to stay warm at night. Second, we need light. Civilizations require that people work and live indoors, and so we need light, which fire gives us. What else do we need? Cooking. Here's a fascinating one. Human beings require cooked food. It doesn't matter whether you're vegetarian or carnivore, you have to have cooked food. Even though there are those that have tried to live on raw diets, studies have shown that even with extremely high-grade foods that would not have been available in the past, 50% of the women lose their menstrual cycle on a pure raw food diet. And men have similar problems that would limit reproductive capabilities. Lastly, our society's ability to advance has always been driven by fire. When you take clay and combine it with fire, you make bricks. With a little more creativity, you can make pottery to produce vessels, so you can eat and drink in a civilized fashion. You put fire to sand, and you make glass. Fire is used to make steel from iron ore. In modern times, fire is ubiquitous in manufacturing. Most industrial processes rely on fire for heating, oxidizing, reducing. We drive our cars on tires that are made from carbon black, a material that comes directly from fire. The paint on our walls is based on titania that comes from fire. So let's regroup. Perhaps the most fundamental needs of civilized man are accomplished with one thing: fire. Heat, light, cooking, and manufacturing all are made possible by one thing: fire. But one last thing to ponder when you're trying to make sense of the multifunctionality of nature. Unlike water and unlike trees, of all the creatures on Earth, only humans use fire. No species in the world, except for man, has ever harnessed fire. And perhaps recognizing the unique function of fire, it should come as no surprise that anthropologists have found that every single civilization that has ever existed, every one of them has harnessed fire. Every one of them. Fire has been a companion to man throughout history. It's uniquely coupled to man, and man is coupled to fire. So now you may be thinking, well, you know, Rich is living in the Dark Ages. Sure, we used to use fire for lighting, for heating, for cooking, but that's the past. That was a long time ago. We're a modern man. And we've moved away from that primitive technology of fire long ago, and now we have modern electricity. So let's take a look at something, and I think this is going to take a little bit of time, but it's a fascinating thing to see, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time. Hopefully you don't mind. This is on YouTube. You can get on YouTube. It shows, I'm going to have to give you a little bit of background because it's a lot of information on this, but you'll learn a lot if you bear with me. On the x-axis is income. It's in a log scale. So this is $400, and it's based on, you know, present day dollars. 4,000, 40,000. Big difference. Remember, they're log scale. On this axis is lifespan. So this says 25 years is the average lifespan. Again, it considers, you know, there could be infant mortality, so it's averaged out. This is 50 years, 75 years. So I'm showing this because this graph represents fundamental drivers of human beings. We want to live long and prosper, right? That's our goal, live long and prosper. So we don't want to be in that corner, right? But notice in 1814, everybody was in this corner. Now, what is this everybody? Well, this is another thing. There's a lot of information going on here. The colors represent the continents, okay? And the size of the circle represents the population. So a big red circle represents what? China. So this is China. The second big red circle represents what? Well, you know it's in Asia, so India. Okay. So we know, but despite that, in 1814, we were all living pretty well the same. We were poor and died young. The average lifespan, if you lived beyond 40 on average, was rare. Obviously, people lived longer. A lot of people died young. There were child labor, et cetera, and a lot of disease. Let's see what happens as we go on. And you'll watch this dynamically occurring. So you can actually see progression over time. And things are pretty well stable. Then all of a sudden, you see something start to take off right here. Somebody who's orangish is starting to have prosperity and a little bit longer life. And it was around the 1860s, 1870s. What is that? Anybody?
Cold.
Well, no, I don't know. What country? That's orange, not black. What country is that? England. And what happened in England? The Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution was created about really to get water, to pump water out of coal mines, because coal was used to heat homes and cook. So England all of a sudden started to advance in terms of time and in terms of life. Let's keep going. Now all of a sudden, there's a pretty, remember continents, there's this yellow thing. What do you think that is? United States. So we're catching up. We were behind England in the Industrial Revolution, but we're catching up. And we catch up pretty quickly. But let's keep watching, because what we're seeing now is that lifespans are increasing and incomes are increasing. And you can see they're rapidly increasing. Once the Industrial Revolution kicks in, lifespans take off. So what does that tell us? What's changed in this period? What's basically happened is we've got energy. We took coal out of the ground, we burned it, and we now have energy. So what we did is we were able to, along the lines of Stifel gens, we focused on cleaning up our water, cleaning up our sanitation, having food, having shelter, and having energy so our children didn't have to go to work at age 6. And all of a sudden, we're living longer and prospering. Let's keep going, and we'll go to about 1940. So I stop right about here. Notice what's happened. In the developed world, our lifespan is already approaching about 60, 70 years. And our income's pretty big too. Why is that important? Anybody know what happened in the late 1920s, what we invented? We invented penicillin. It didn't really kick in until the 1940s when we were really using it. So notice that we went from really being a very poor, short life society to living, and notice the trajectory is going straight up before medicine even came into the picture. So in fact, what we're realizing is just having clean sanitary conditions and having energy is enormously responsible for our life improvement. And notice it keeps going up at this trajectory. So we're over here, we're already at in the 70-year lifespan. Now as time goes on, you notice that countries like China and India, who are really very depressed, are going to now start coming up. So they're still living short lives. China, you'd expect, the lifespan will increase, but the income won't because it's communist China. So watch what happens. The Cultural Revolution had that dip. And so now China is living longer, and now they're kicking in to start having higher income over very quickly as the 2000. And so what we take away from this is the following. If you look at the nature right now, in 2006, our world energy, we have oil for transportation primarily, coal for electricity, gas for almost anything, and we have biomass waste. People are still cooking with wood and biomass. This right here, which is basically constitutes combustion, constitutes fire. This is 90% of our energy. So our heating, our lighting, our manufacturing, it still all comes from fire. This is nuclear and renewables count for about 10%. So we see today more than ever that fire is coupled to man's existence. Man nurtures fire. Fire provides for the basic needs that allow human beings to live in a civilized manner. So next time that you have a chance to take a stroll, something to ponder. As I mentioned, the underlying theme of this talk is gratitude. And I have already thanked all of you, those of you at the university who have contributed to my career, but I'm saving the best for last. I want to thank my parents and I want to thank my wife. My parents, unfortunately, my father is not well enough to be here, but they have both been extremely supportive of everything that I've done throughout my career and all decisions I've made. And I'm eternally grateful for you, Mom, and please let Dad know this as well. From the moment I met my wife, Maury, she's been behind me, supporting me in every way. My family knows this problem I have. The other one's laughing. Maury worked as a waitress to put us through school. She's been my friend, confidant, and advisor throughout my career. In addition to being the ultimate wife, she's been the ultimate coach. And for this, we share this honor. Any questions?